Hi there, this is Nick Tate. I'm super excited to be part of the new documentary, The Eagle Has Landed. An exclusive look starts now.
50 years ago, an icon was born. The Eagle transporter is one of the greatest sci-fi spacecraft ever conceived. To this day, the design provokes an intense devotion among countless fans around the world. The question is, why? I'm writer-director Jeffrey Morris. I've been enamored with the Eagle since I first saw it in the TV series Space 1999 back in 1975. As a child who followed the Apollo program, the Eagle felt like a direct descendant of NASA's lunar module. Those transformative moon missions left an indelible impact on a generation, as did the Eagle in Space 1999. Over the years, I've discovered that I'm just one of millions of fans who has an affection for the Eagle and a nostalgia for a future we never achieved. So I'm shooting a feature documentary about the origins of this beloved ship, while also exploring its ongoing cultural impact. And I'm inviting you to join me. I'll be speaking with the Eagle's designer, visual effects wizard Brian Johnson. I'll also chat with Nick Tate, the actor who played legendary pilot Captain Alan Carter. It's going to be an epic journey as I travel around the globe to speak with Eagle aficionados and luminaries from the worlds of science and science fiction. As for myself, the visionary world building in Space 1999 blew my mind. It ultimately inspired me to become a filmmaker and production designer. I'm the creator of hard sci-fi projects such as the forthcoming deep space adventure Persephone, the apocalyptic underwater thriller Oceanus, and the universe-hopping techno-fantasy Parallel Man. Now I'm bringing all of my experience and passion to the creation of this documentary. The good news is we've already begun production. We self-financed a shoot in Louisville, Kentucky at Wonderfest, where I spoke with lifelong Eagle fans from around the country. They shared passionate stories about the iconic vessel and the aspects that make it so memorable. Then I traveled to Colorado, where I interviewed Kevin J. Anderson, the best-selling author of books set in the Dune, Star Wars, and X-Files universes. He also happens to be a huge fan of Space 1999. Recently, Kevin and I co-authored the novelization of my film Persephone. We had a blast discussing our mutual love of the Eagle and what it represents. Yet, there's still plenty left to do. I have to hire production crews at locations around the world. I also need to create visual effects and music. And of course, it all has to be edited together at a level that will rival any award-winning documentary. Now I'm asking for your assistance in completing the voyage. Check out our Kickstarter. There are tons of great rewards and even a couple of awesome stretch goals. A future began 50 years ago, and its time is now. Become a supporter of The Eagle Has Landed.
Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, the as yet undefined, although it was undefined, I mean, it was defined. I got to go find and read it because somebody sent me a great definition of what your existential Mr. Rogers means. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett. I'm not what it means. I'm what it is, what I am. Anyway, Robert Meyer Burnett is here, Robcasting at you. I'm talking to myself about myself in the third person. What's happening? This is Robservations 889. Yeah, and I'm coming at you, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Robcasting, you know the drill. You know what's happening. First of all, before I get into today's topic, I got a bitch, and people are going to be like, this is like the ultimate Western first world problem, but it has to do with Star Trek, so I'm going to bitch. So, as many of you who still collect toys or pay attention to any of that, I'm sure a lot of you do. No, I'm just kidding. Many probably don't. But a lot of the companies have started to crowdfund to make larger, more expensive items. Things that maybe in a boardroom it wouldn't make sense to make. Hasbro has been doing this. Their HasLabs things. They did things like they made a 3 3/4 inch Jabba the Hutt sail barge for the regular Star Wars action figures. That was quite expensive. It was like $500, $400 or something. Maybe it was $600. I forget exactly but it was awesome. So what they do is, because it's such a large, pricey item, you pre-buy it. You pre-buy it, and if they hit a certain mark, they'll make it. And I'm sure they got a healthy profit margin written into it, but obviously it's not something that they could pull. A toy company is not going to pull the trigger on a $600 toy or a $500 or $400 toy for the mass market. I mean, it doesn't fit into any business model. We recently saw it just closed, The Ghost from Rebels, and now Ahsoka. They finished a crowdfunding campaign for a beautiful version of The Ghost. I mean, it's fantastic. And that was done. HasLabs has done like a Sentinel. They did a Eunuch from the X-Men. They did a Unicron from Transformers. It was huge. So it's pretty neat what they're doing with these crowdfunding campaigns. And, if you want to spend the money, if you want these premium priced items, you can get them. As long as they reach. Some things have not funded. There are things that didn't fund, unfortunately. Well, anyway, so Tomy, the Japanese toy company, Tomy, which I thought was kind of out of left field last year, ran a crowdfunding campaign for a 1/350th scale, say it with me now, Starship Enterprise from the original series. A 1/350 scale. Now, I already have. What's interesting about this size? Why did they pick this size? Master Replicas about 15 years ago did the ultimate version of the Enterprise. It was also 1/350 scale. It was lighted. It was motorized. I have mine. It got kind of smashed in our move to here, which really makes me very, very sad. But it was by far the greatest pre-built Enterprise replica ever made. To this day, 15 years later, no one's ever surpassed it. Then Round 2 Models makes a model kit of the 1/350th scale Enterprise in 3 different versions. In the pilot version, the first pilot version, the second pilot version, and the production version. And you can choose to make it in one of those 3 ways. It's great. It's an incredible model. And if you take the time to paint it, you can have an amazing replica. There's a light kit in it. You can buy secondary market parts and trick it out and make it even more accurate. It's amazing. But anyway, so the Japanese toy company, Tomy, showed this, that they were going to make their own 1/350th scale Enterprise. And it was a crowdfunding campaign. And, they were looking to make a certain amount of money. Here's their crowdfunding campaign. They were looking to make a certain amount of money. They changed it. They brought it down when they saw it probably wouldn't hit. But so 2,526 people paid $600 essentially, $599 plus shipping to get this. And it closed 421 days ago. So, and when it closes, they take your money, and they were going to make this replica. Now, what's interesting about this replica is because it's a toy company and the Enterprise, if you're doing a replica of the Enterprise, toy companies always want to put some kind of play value into things. I don't know why. Ever since I was a kid, I'm like, I've talked about it before, but why did the first Kenner TIE Fighter have to have spring-loaded wings, which is always dumb? You're supposed to simulate an explosion, and the wings would pop off and fall down to the side. It looks so stupid. But they need, the toy company, the thinking is that, well, we have to give kids something to do. I'm like, no, man, just give me something that looks like the fucking ship from the movie. Don't make it white, and don't make the TIE Fighters aren't white. They got this weird blue-gray color. Make it that color. You can look at ILM, but no. And then they made the wings too small. They were too far apart and they were too small. It wasn't until like 30 years later that we actually got a fairly accurate toy of the TIE Fighter when Hasbro took over Star Wars. So good on them. But what you want is an accurate thing. Now, what was interesting about this Tomy campaign was they came up with an interesting gimmick. So we all know, we saw an encounter at Farpoint, that the Enterprise D can saucer separate. The saucer can separate, the drive section can separate from the primary hull, which is the dish. Well, this toy was going to be able to do the same thing, except with the TOS, the original series Enterprise. You might say, but we never saw that happen. No, but it was referred to once in the second season episode, The Apple, where Kirk is talking to Scotty because Vol is holding the ship and they can't get out. And Kirk says, dump the drive section and crack out of there with the primary hull. Or he says the main hull. And that was the first time that we heard about the saucer section being able to do that. And then, of course, it's speculated that on the underside that there were landing platforms in case that ever happened. I used to collect Star Trek fanzines, and it was really cool. There was around the time the motion picture came out, or after the motion picture came out, a magazine called Enterprise Incidents. This was their wraparound cover. This is the front cover. And of course, this was the back cover that showed the refit Enterprise doing that, a saucer separation. This predated Next Generation by a decade. Not quite a decade, actually, about 6 or 7 years maybe. But so there you go. So saucer separation. Now this is something that Tomy was going to incorporate into their toy. And for me, that's kind of cool. But the one thing that happened because of that, now you'll notice, actually, let me enlarge this picture, if I may, so you can actually take a gander. What I'm showing to you is something that is not, in fact, if you see where the dorsal spine, if you see where the primary hull is attached to the secondary hull, you see a line underneath the saucer section here where the ship separates. This is not canonical, and this was something they added to the toy. So you could display it like this, which is, all right. There's a shuttle bay in this that lights up, that comes with shuttlecraft. And there's all, it was going to be pretty badass. So a good looking display piece. Now, I want you to take a gander at this. And I want you to notice, look at the secondary hull where the deflector dish is, and then look at the NCC 1701 pennant on the actual warp nacelle. Now, you'll notice that this is what they're showing us, and this is what they said, this is what you're spending your money on. This was the prototype that they showed. Clearly, you can see the line that separates the saucer section. By the way, the saucer section looks a little small here, but okay. It's obviously going to light up. And they've been sending out, and kudos to them, Tomy has been sending out updates. So if you spent the $600, you drop the green, and you were getting a monthly update about the status of this thing that you've paid for, 15, 16 months ago? Something like that. So, that's what was going on, which is what should happen. And they were sending out really good, they call them in transmissions. And so let me read you one. Dear Star Trek fan, thanks to all who joined us live this afternoon. They used to have YouTube videos, and the two guys that were on the YouTube videos, you can go watch them. They're on YouTube now. They call themselves the Tomy Prestige Select Team. The Tomy Prestige Select Team. Now, one of the things that they showed us was, if you look, here was some of the original parts. Now, you can see that you have the secondary hull here. Now, look in the middle. You see how there's in the middle here where you see the spine, but then you see the secondary hull here, and there are 3 huge ovals on the bottom. There's one up top. You can see where the warp engine fits in, but you see these 3 holes. These are screw holes that are made to put screws in to hold both sides of the secondary hull together. Now, any modeler worth their salt, anybody who builds the 1/350th scale model, first of all, they don't have that. There's just two halves. What you do is you use sand and you use putty. You don't want seams to show on the Enterprise. I mean, that's a given. So you expect the Enterprise to look like this. Again, this is a picture of their prototype that they showed us. And I want you to take particular note of the dorsal, the connecting spine, and then the side of the ship. Okay, this looks great, right? Cool. It's lit up. It's really neat. Now, I was excited about this. I followed it religiously. Today, and I have to say that during this time, I'm jumping the gun here. This is from one of their videos. Now it says on this video, I took a frame grab from their video. You see where it says this deco needs lots of fixes? If you look up at the top of this hull, you can see these oval shapes. And then on the dorsal, you see a circle there. There's a circle both on the bottom left of it, the bottom right of it. These pieces, obviously, are not supposed to be there. And they certainly weren't on the prototype. Here's their prototype, which you can see. And then here, they're actually showing what is going to be fixed as the model was making its progression. And you see this stuff. Now, these things were supposed to be fixed. You can see there's a hole in the dorsal spine on the top there as well. And they told us that the seams, if you see, like on this picture too, if you see the strut that holds up the warp nacelle, there are seams there as well. Those are not supposed to be there. And if this were a plastic model kit, you'd fill them and sand them so you wouldn't see them. And they promised us that they were going to fix them. Well, today they sent us an email. They're supposed to start shipping this on October 6th. They sent an email to everyone that paid $600 that has been following their updates for the last 14 or 15 months. And this is what they wrote us. This is what they sent everybody. Now, keep in mind, they called themselves the Tomy Prestige Select Team. This is the email that we got today. To our collector community. Through the course of development of the Star Trek NCC 1701 USS Enterprise, a specific design detail we thought we could achieve could not be realized in final production. Specifically, the screw hole covers and seams are still somewhat visible on the final production units. Still somewhat visible. Let me just read this whole thing. Still somewhat visible. Keep in mind, they sent this email out. It's supposed to ship on October 6th. We've worked on making the covers as flush as possible, and we've minimized the seam lines as much as we can. Tomy has a deep passion for creating high-quality die-casts that collectors will want to own and enjoy for years to come. With the Star Trek NCC 1701 USS Enterprise, we believe we've created a very special die-cast replica that will be a jewel in your collection. If the design detail leads you to be dissatisfied with your purchase, please contact Tomy Customer Services at cs@tomy.com or at 1-800-704-8697 before shipping begins on October 6th. We are thrilled to share the final product with you. Thank you for your enthusiasm, support, feedback, and development and production through the development production process. We always strive to do our best for customers and are appreciative of your partnership. This does not say, this email for the very first time does not say it comes from the Tomy Prestige Select team. It just says, best regards, Team Tomy. Now, for anyone that's going to drop $600 on a inert 3-foot replica of the Enterprise, not unlike what Flint had on his desk in Requiem for Methuselah, we were led to believe through the entire process what we were getting. Again, this is a picture of their prototype. As you can see, there are not these oval notches where the screws go on it. And also, if you look at this picture, up on the warp nacelle, and you see on the struts, the front strut, there are now seams that run through the middle of the warp nacelle, which also wasn't, if you look again, here's their prototype. See where the NCC 1701 is? The warp nacelle is smooth there. In their final version, there is a giant ugly seam that goes right through the middle of that NCC 1701 warp nacelle, right through the middle. Now, they basically, and they knew, they send out this email today saying, well, if you, like, what, if you want a refund? Like, we followed, here's a company that we followed from the very beginnings of this. Everybody who, over almost 2,500 people were excited enough to pay $600 for this. A toy company comes out and says, we're planting our flag. And since then, they've done a crowdfunding campaign for a 1/10 scale Back to the Future DeLorean. So they wanted to get into this business. Now, why is this irksome to me? Well, 1, because it's Star Trek. 2, I ordered it. 3, I was really excited about getting it, waited 15 months for it. And then literally almost at the 11th hour, this company that I have followed, that they've come out and had us follow this and comment, and they've put out videos, and we've been supportive. They've asked for feedback and input. They were doing such a good job. And at the 11th hour, they screw the pooch. And not only do they screw the pooch, they don't even have the same group of guys. These 2 guys that were the face of this no longer return emails, no longer talk to anybody. And for me, it's disappointing. You know how I always talk about modern Star Trek metaphor? I always joke about this, that metaphorically what's been done, that modern Star Trek stands as a testament to everything wrong with the United States right now. And this is something, this could have been alleviated. First of all, this is something that any toy maker or anybody worth their salt, as you're looking at this piece and you see these circular pieces in the middle of the hull, the first question that you would ask, if this is how they've chosen to manufacture this, and by the way, look up in the right corner there. Look at all the circular holes in the saucer section too. All of these circular holes are where screws attach one side to another. None of these, all of these screw holes when they were going to make this were supposed to be filled and sanded down. Look at how many of them there are all over this. And to me, if you look at a Master Replicas version of the Enterprise, or you look at that was admittedly $1,200, or you look at the model kit, there are no screw holes like that. It's because they decided to make it out of die cast. They thought when they started this process they were going to be able to get rid of those. But anybody worth their salt would have been looking at this from the very beginning, looking at these toolings and saying, how are you going to, first of all, use those holes and screw the thing together? And once it's screwed together, how are you going to either fill those holes or cover them and sand them down so you make the hull look smooth? Because you've got these circular holes all over what's supposed to be a replica of the Enterprise, and those holes are not canonical. They're not on the Enterprise. That's a function of how you decided to make this product. And then you sell it to everybody. And then literally, like, I feel it's incredibly disingenuous to come out and go, how far, you're a little over 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks out from shipping this product. You You know the firestorm that's going to happen when all of these collectors, because you lied to us. You promised us, look on this video, the video that you made. Here's the video. The deco needs lots of fixes. It's on your fucking video. You know this because you're dealing with the people that restored the Enterprise for the Smithsonian. This is the Enterprise you were trying to duplicate. Do you see those holes in the hull in the Smithsonian's version? Of course not. Of course not. You know why? Because they're not there. Now, people would say, well, Rob, look, I'm incensed because I paid the money, and I'm not getting what I paid for. But this is the thing. This is more indicative of the modern age. I can't stand it. I always talk about how working in Hollywood is such a good thing, that the people that actually produce movies, they don't make these kinds of mistakes. They can't because they're too expensive to make. The great thing about making movies is I'm not saying people who make movies. I'm talking about production, people that work in production, great production managers. If a production is humming, you can solve any problem. I've often said that you want to win a war, give it to a great UPM, and a great line producer. They'll win your war for you. But when I see something like this happen, I'm like, how do you not know? It's the same thing. Why is there mistakes when somebody prints a movie on 4K and you get the wrong audio? Because our country is not doing what it needs to do to make sure what they're trying to do will succeed. Our products should never fail. We should not have salmonella in our food supply. We should not have, not to make light of it, but, we should not have these kinds of indents on the secondary hull of a Constitution-class starship, 350 scale replica. And it's really annoying. And you look at this, and then you have people trying oh, we're really sorry, maybe you want a refund. Nobody wants a refund. They want what they fucking paid for. They want the ship that they waited 15 months for, that they gave their money to, that you've had and collected interest on, or used whatever it is you use it for, because you certainly didn't produce the product that you promised us. The question is why? Why didn't you do that? I mean, you knew this. You were showing this to us for over a year, and you still fuck it up at the end. And then write some lame email going, well, here's a number to call if you don't. I would imagine that you had a firestorm of people calling. I wrote a letter. I said, look, still send me the fucking thing, but I mean, if I want to put it away in a box, maybe I'll sell it for half price later. I don't know. I mean, it was irksome to me today to see something like this happen. Once again, Star Trek let me down. The state of modern Star Trek, because the people that are making shit for Star Trek don't know what the fuck they're doing. Although, to be fair, on the flip side, XO6 dropped their pre-order for Saavik, their 6-scale Saavik, which is beautiful. And a company, Vice, out of England, also dropped. They're making 200 versions of a Star Trek: The Motion Picture poster that's beautiful. So God taketh away, and God giveth, which I guess is life. But anyway, piss me off, and so I'm subjecting you to this. But you know what? It's like, why is everything going to hell in a handbasket? Because nobody takes pride in their work anymore. I mean, and these guys, what's sad to me is the two guys that were fronting this did take pride. They were really excited about what was going on. They should know better. I mean, I liked them. I liked the fact they did video updates. On all their video updates, the comments have been turned off. It's like, you know what? Let us vent. You think we're stupid? You think collectors, how is it? Have you ever gone into a 6-scale forum and talk about how they bitch and moan about hot toys? How is it that a company wants to come out and they were supposed to make more ships? They were going to do the refit Enterprise, which is what I really wanted. They're not going to do it now. They're going to have so much blowback from this. And by the way, where was Paramount? Where did Paramount? Why didn't John Van Sitters? I know he got bumped up to, he's the brand. He controls all the brands. But it's the, you know what? People sit there and go, Rob, what do you care? It's just a toy. No, it metaphorically represents all of America. And it certainly represents the Star Trek franchise. That all we get is mediocrity. Mediocrity and people that can't do their fucking jobs. They can't write scripts. And they can't make a toy of the Enterprise. And how many toys of the Enterprise have I owned? A lot. But you know what? Of all those toys, I'll tell you what none of them have ever had. They've never had those fucking ovals in their secondary hulls before, or on the underside of their saucer sections. Sure, and if they have screws in them, they don't hide them. You see the screws because you know it's a toy. And that toy was not $600 fucking dollars. Anyway, let's get to the topic at hand, shall we? So, a lot of people have always asked me, what's up with Fred? What's up with Frederick Douglass? Why do you have Frederick Douglass on your microphone? And some people say that, I mean, during the time that I've had Frederick Douglass on my microphone, a lot of changes happened in the country. A lot of BLM riots, you know, there was all kinds of strife. I had my own cancellation over at Collider, you know, because during those riots, people thought I was advocated killing looters. Really, I was only talking about the death of one man, but that's okay. We don't have to rehash that. So my having Frederick Douglass on my microphone has been fairly controversial, or not. Sometimes people just ask. People have written me in. I haven't shared some things that people have written me in about having Frederick Douglass. Other people have just asked, well, why do you have Frederick Douglass? Part of the reason that I have Frederick Douglass is because of Star Trek. And I'll tell you why. He's one of the great orators of American history. His speeches were incredible. The man, liberated slave, liberated in the 30s. He wrote his first, he's written two. He wrote his first autobiography in the 40s. And pre-Civil War, he was asked to give arguably one of the most famous speeches ever given. And it's really known as his 4th of July speech. Now, I want to read some of that to you. Now, the thing about his 4th of July speech was, man, it was incendiary. Absolutely incendiary. So on July 5th, 1852, Frederick Douglass gave a keynote address at the Independence Day celebration and asked, and this is the title of the speech, what is the slave to the 4th of July? And Frederick Douglass traveled half the year and gave speeches. And he acknowledged the founding fathers of America and the architects of the Declaration of Independence. And he said this, fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men, too, great enough to give frame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to raise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable. And yet, I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. This is on the 4th of fucking July, and this man was a former slave. Now, here's a great part of this speech. Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. That was part of this speech. Pretty emphatic. But here's the thing. With all that, this man was a former slave. And he still lived in, we're talking pre-Civil War now. Pre-Civil War America, where he's giving this speech. Now, within this speech, he gave, one of the great commentaries on America ever given. Former slave, basically self-educated. And if you look into a lot of these men, Booker T. Washington, I quoted Booker T. Washington talking about how I tweeted out a couple of quotes from him when he talked about when he was a slave, all he wanted to do was learn to read. And after emancipation, he felt that going into a schoolhouse would be akin to going into paradise. These were former slaves. And after emancipation, even before emancipation, there were secret schools. These were learned men that learned because they wanted to learn, and they understood the power. To be emancipated was not simply to not be a slave anymore. It was the ability to go get education. And that education was the real power. That was the fire that Prometheus would have brought down from. It wasn't Prometheus giving them fire and putting fire in their hands. It was the fact that they could go into a schoolhouse and they knew it. And Frederick Douglass was one of the greats. And talk about education. But here was a man. I want to read this. This is what he said. This is in the same speech. The same speech. And if you don't think this is like, you think about Bill Pullman in Independence Day, or you think about Michael Douglas, Andrew Shepard, and an American president. You think about like Jimmy Stewart, going to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, or some of the great speeches ever given on film and television. They're good, but they're not as good as Frederick Douglass will give you. And listen to what Frederick Douglass had to say in the speech where he said, dude, does this Independence Day have anything to do with me, us, any of the people, that are enslaved? What does it have to do with? Listen to this. He's talking about Independence Day. The population of the country at the time stood at the insignificant number of 3 millions. The country was poor in the munitions of war. The population was weak and scattered, and the country a wilderness unsubdued. There were then no means of concert and combination such as exist now. Neither steam nor lightning had been reduced to order and discipline. From the Potomac to the Delaware was a journey of many days. Under these and innumerable other disadvantages, your fathers declared for liberty and independence and triumphed. Fellow citizens, I am not wanting to respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men, too. Great enough to give fame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to raise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable, and yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. They love their country better than their own private interests, and though this is not the highest form of human excellence, all will concede that it is a rare virtue, and that when it is exhibited, it ought to command respect. He who will, intelligently, lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interests. They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but that they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times. I mean, come on. This man was a slave, and he said this about the founders, the men who wrote the Declaration of Independence, many of whom were slave owners. That's a far cry from where we are today, really. I don't know if you would hear anybody speak that way about the founding fathers, but let's read a little bit more. How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. They seized upon eternal principles and set a glorious example in their defense. Mark them. Fully appreciating the hardships to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, honorably inviting the scrutiny of an onlooking world, reverently appealing to heaven to attest their sincerity, soundly comprehending the solemn responsibility they were about to assume, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them, your fathers, the fathers of this republic, did most deliberately, under the inspiration of a glorious patriotism and with a sublime faith in the great principles of justice and freedom, lay deep the cornerstone of the national superstructure which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you. Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstrations of joyous enthusiasm. Banners and pennants wave exultantly on the breeze. The din of business, too, is hushed. Even Mammon seems to have quitted his grasp on this day. The ear-piercing fife and stirring drum unite their accents with the ascending peal of 1,000 church bells. Prayers are made, hymns are sung, and sermons are preached in honor of this day, while the quick martial tramp of a great and multitudinous nation, echoed back by all the hills, valleys, and mountains of a vast continent, bespeak the occasion one of thrilling and universal interest. A nation's jubilee. Well, and then the rest of it, it's not so nice, but it's honest. And I'm going to put that in the chat right now. You can read this whole speech, and I think that you should, because it's one of the great speeches, I think, ever given in the United States of America, which is why I love Frederick Douglass. He gave many speeches that were great, but this is probably his most famous. And what's surprising to me is I never hear anybody talk about it. I mean, you'd think that when people go back and they talk about American history, that this speech that he gives would be at the forefront, because the great dichotomy that he brought forth in this speech is quite amazing. I mean, he even admits what happened with the Declaration of Independence, the rising up against the British, and all of that was amazing. But as you can read, he certainly has a lot to say, a lot more to say about it, being a former slave and what that means to him as well. And worth reading, I think. And I'll tell you something. You know, when you think about what's going on today with the writers' strike and all of that, it's these kinds of speeches that are worth going back to. This is the basis of great writing. And, you know, I don't think it gets talked about enough. But even that is not what I'm here to talk about today. I just wanted to explain why I love Frederick Douglass. And an amazing, amazing man. But why I wanted to talk about Frederick Douglass is because he was a fan of liberal arts and a liberal arts education. I went to the Evergreen State College, and I have, I guess, I'll call it a liberal arts degree with an emphasis in cinema, television production. And I went to the Evergreen State College, which was known as, I used to call it the hippie school, because it was founded in 1967. We didn't get grades. Crunchy, chewy granola college. That's what I called it. But so that's where I went. And then I went to USC. But what's interesting is, you know, I get a lot of people, a lot of people today go, oh, Rob, you're a libtard, or this and the other thing. I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean? Liberal just means you're open to, I mean, I consider myself a classical liberal, but liberal just means really that you're open to new ideas. And I came from a liberal arts background. But it was funny because I was looking around for stuff about liberal arts, you know, and I wonder if is there something that I could talk about with regard to liberal arts and lo and behold, I came across an article I know you knew I would get to this point. An article in The Atlantic from 2015. Frederick Douglass, defender of the liberal arts. And I was like, what? My man Fred defending liberal arts? I'm like, and I had not read this. And this is by E. Thomas Finan, and this is from The Atlantic, and it was published in 2015, April 7th, 2015. This isn't a long article. But though he believed vocational education was key to empowerment, the former slaves' writing offer a reminder that subjects like literature and philosophy are still integral to social mobility. In a speech delivered at the 1894 dedication of the Manassas Industrial School for Colored Youth, which was founded to provide technical education for African Americans, Frederick Douglass argued that learning and liberty went hand in hand. He underlined the importance of education as part of a process of realizing human potential, furthering justice, and achieving freedom. Education means emancipation, he said. It means light and liberty. It means the uplifting of the soul of man into the glorious light of truth, the light only by which men can be free. To deny education to any people is one of the greatest crimes against human nature. God damn, I love Frederick Douglass. As a former slave, Douglass well understood the weight of chains and the yearning to break free. He also believed in the value of vocational training that increased students' economic potential. Yet, as Douglass demonstrated, the emancipation that comes from education is not confined to economic empowerment. Douglass's own life testified to the ability of the liberal arts, fields such as literature, philosophy, the physical sciences, and social sciences, to inspire internal emancipation as well. Teaching industrial vocational skills to African Americans would help them climb the ladder from slave to integrated free man. I always say, when I see free man written like as one word, come on, everybody, you got to think Fremen, right? I got to think Dune. That's all I can say. I can't even say free man. It doesn't sound, I want to say Fremen. Douglass's example offers a helpful corrective to the tendency of contemporary education debates to fixate on economic questions. On both sides of the aisle, many policymakers assume that public education's principal goal is to teach students marketable skills so that they can become productive economic actors. This assumption helps explain the widespread celebration of STEM, science, science, technology, engineering, and math, and de facto mockery of many liberal arts degrees, especially those infamous art history majors. The Obama administration, too, remember this is 2015, often frames education policy as an economic issue. Just look at the White House's website on education. To prepare Americans for the jobs of the future and help restore middle-class security, it reads, we have to out-educate the world, and that starts with a strong school system. In a similar vein, states across the country are deliberating over whether the liberal arts still have a role in education. A debate recently erupted in Wisconsin, for example, after a gubernatorial budget proposal, whether mistakenly or not, called for the public university system to forfeit the search for truth as an official purpose, and instead focus solely on training students for in-demand jobs. Frederick Douglass reveals that a single-minded focus on education as a vocational enterprise risks obscuring other important aims, including personal development, ethical maturation, and a preparation for civic life. Producing students who are able to succeed in the workforce is a worthy goal, but vocational skills need to be enriched by a more holistic, humanistic perspective. Since their early foundation in the ancient world, the liberal arts have helped develop this perspective. Again, the liberal arts and vocational skills are not diametrically opposed. The kind of critical thinking encouraged by the former can be useful in any profession, for instance, but the liberal arts offer more than indirect economic benefits. They can, for example, nurture the thoughtfulness important in a free society. So, the funny thing about that is, it made me start thinking about, wow, my liberal arts education and the education I got, I had a pretty good public school education at Mercer Island High School, South Mercer Junior High, and Island Park Elementary School, to the point where I can tell you who all my teachers were in elementary school. I had a great education, and it was a very broad-based education. And I think, in order to make film, especially today, having a multitude of skills and knowing a multitude of things about the world really helps when it comes to production, really helps when it comes to working in Hollywood. It's funny, I'm working with mystery writer Max Allan Collins on a project. And I was doing a lot to push that project forward. You're going to be hearing a lot about that soon. It is an entertainment product. We're actually working on making some scripted podcasts, or as I like to call them, dramatic audio dramas that are movies without pictures. That's what we're going for. Written by Max Allan Collins. And we've already got some pretty interesting talent lined up, which I'll be able to talk more about in the coming days. But our company, Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited, will be producing these with Max and Mike Bodden and myself and a few others. And we're going to be making these, and we're going to need your help. But we'll talk about that in the future. But, Max said to me as I was working on this project and getting back to him and telling him where we were at, this was last night at like 11 o'clock, he was like, when do you ever stop working? How are you able to do all of these different kinds of things? You're off working on a movie one day, you're doing Designing Hollywood another day, you're doing YouTube shows today, and now you're talking about producing this project and getting the talent together to record. And I, this was just last night, and I'm stopping to think, I'm like, well, it's really all part of the same thing. It's all part of trying to entertain and to broaden. For me, I just want to share my enthusiasm with all this stuff. I don't purport to know anything that other people don't already know. I'm not some genius. I'm just enthusiastic about a lot of stuff. When we had, it's probably not, I don't know if they do this anymore, but I've said before on the show, when I was a kid, there was a thing called Indian Guides. I'm sure now it's been canceled or deemed racist or inappropriate or whatever, but in Indian Guides, it was before you could get into Cub Scouts. So you did Indian Guides, and it was I don't even know where it came from, but Indian Guides started where you would get together with your dad and you would go to these meetings, and then you guys would all hang out together as father, son, and then you'd go on these events. And yet, I guess it was because the idea of what indigenous people would do, get together, go out on hunting parties or that kind of thing. And my dad called me, and you would get an Indian name, Dances with Wolves, for instance. My Indian name was Chief Running Mouth. So that's what my dad called me. And I've told the story before when I was on this show, that my mom, when I was in the second grade, that I used to come home from school and tell everybody over the dinner table for the first couple of weeks. Actually, I missed the first couple of weeks of second grade because I had chicken pox. But the next couple of weeks that I would come home and have to reiterate everything I'd learned at school, and I mean everything, over the dinner table, to the point where my mom finally told me, shut up. She's like, please don't. I mean, it must have been so annoying. Your second grader comes home and has to reiterate every single thing, which you also had already learned in the second grade. So it's not something that they didn't already know. I can only imagine how annoying that must have been. So I've always just liked stuff. I've always just liked learning, and the more broad base of knowledge you have, and I don't mean like a cursory Wikipedia thing. I mean, if you have a broad base of knowledge about a lot of different stuff, your experience of the world will be better. Everywhere you go, there's something interesting. Literally everywhere you go. And if you approach the world that way, and certainly when you work in production, when you work in Hollywood, the more three-dimensional your thinking is, the better off and the more valuable you will be, especially on productions. And I learned that working in the art department on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, because I was asked to do so many different kinds of things. One day I'm hammering nails and helping build a gas station set, or I'm helping build a farmhouse set, or suddenly I'm working with the prop department making things out of metal,
Or I was asked, Rob, if there was bodies hanging on slabs and you'd move them around, what would you do? And so I went and I got those hanging red and green buttons like you'd see in an industrial place. And I figured, well, they could move the bodies out like you'd have in a butcher's thing. It was just something that I went and got, and they're like, that's great. We'll use that. And it's in the movie. So I don't see much of that anymore. I don't see much, and I told the story about a World Book Encyclopedia and all that. But that's what I think that I was surprised to find that Frederick Douglass thought that, 75 years ago or something. And it just struck me that the more you learn, the more you know, the better off you'll be in Hollywood. If you want to work in production, the more you know about a lot of things, the better off you'll be. And, you saw that. I saw that a lot down under, working in New Zealand and working in Australia. It's like if something needed to be fixed, you could get like baling wire or something and a duct tape and fix it. and they could. And so, I mean, I don't know if it's because I liked Frederick Douglass as a kid, or I liked him now. It's just the idea. He was such a learned man, and he knew how to give great speeches. And that's, and to find out, I mean, I didn't know that he was an advocate of a liberal arts education. I just didn't know that until I was looking into these things this week. So my man Frederick Douglass, who I've always liked, was an advocate of philosophy, and that doesn't mean, like this article said, not necessarily, he's not saying, hey, we shouldn't learn vocational skills, but, a man of letters also helps, and you can be all of those things, which I thought was pretty cool. And on that note, I received a letter. And I wanted to read this letter because it's fascinating. And again, education has been sort of the last week has been a topic on this show. And this letter is entitled Encyclopedic Adventures. Dear Rob, greetings from the East Coast. It's been a few months since I last wrote, but I've continued to listen to most of your Robservations videos. I especially enjoyed your musings on the value of classical education. Reading old stories shouldn't be an odd hobby. It should be required. Nobody starts from scratch. Anything we do in the world, and the world's past is the great chronicle of when, where, how, and why we live. An education in this past isn't an escape from the present. It's an invaluable set of tools that improves your experience of this day and age. I could not agree more. Already I can sense myself beginning a lengthy defense of the literary canon. That's best saved for another letter. Instead, I'd like to share excerpts from a song and a book your classical education video brought to mind. I have to warn you, what follows may be a bit of a trip. I hope you'll enjoy it for the same reasons you once liked flipping through encyclopedias. The more you know, the more you see connections. Noel Coward is one of my favorite artists. An Englishman of the early and mid-20th century, he was raised in the theater, learning to sing, act, and write. The Roaring '20s were his 20s, and by that time he'd already transitioned from performer to creator, becoming a superstar playwright and composer. Several of his plays were adapted into films, the movie version of Cavalcade winning Best Picture in 1934. Coward soon took a more hands-on approach to filmmaking, alternately as a screenwriter, actor, and director. His most famous cinematic achievement was writing the script for David Lean's 1945 romance, Brief Encounter. His final role came in 1969 when he performed Mr. Bridger opposite Michael Caine's Charlie Croker in The Italian Job. Noel Coward died in 1973. Truly, this man could do it all, at least in the narrative arts. If art was his job, it was also his passion. Life can be overwhelming at times. I'm sure Coward's workload and lifestyle were, and when that happens, letting your mind get lost in something else can be a restorative practice. Coward captures this need in his song, Sail Away. I know when I read this, I did read this before I read this now. You know what I thought of. Styx. Come on. Sail away with the following lines. When a sailor goes to sea, though he leaves his love behind, time and tide will set him free from the grief inside him. Sea and sky will ease his heart, regulate his troubled mind. Every sailor has a chart and a star to guide him home. When the storm clouds are riding through a winter sky, sail away, sail away. When the love light is fading in your sweetheart's eye, sail away, sail away. When you feel your song is orchestrated wrong, why should you prolong your stay? When the wind and the weather blow your dreams sky high, sail away, sail away, sail away. The song continues, but these two stanzas capture the point. Sometimes the best way to deal with the world is not to deal with it. Escape into something better than what you're doing now, but make sure it's something with substance, like sailing. Only then will the act of running away eventually bring you back, better than you were before. Or maybe it's only in these private pursuits that we can find meaning and discover who we are. As Coward writes at the song's end, when soon or late you recognize your fate, that will be your great, great day. On the wings of the morning with your own true love, sail away, sail away, sail away. Although this isn't the specific message of the song, I think Sail Away describes the ennobling art, or the ennobling effect art has on human beings. Storytelling isn't just escape. It's escape that leads to engagement. All the great books and films I've encountered leave me feeling more locked in with reality, not less. For a more explicit example of this sailing away into art, I turn back to the 18th century. By the way, I absolutely agree with you. As I've often said, the best fiction has the most truth in it. Lawrence Sterne was an Anglican minister and novelist who did most of his writing when Dennis Diderot was still publishing the Encyclopedia, the original encyclopedia. Sterne is best known for Tristram Shandy, a stunning work of experimental fiction. In the book, the title character keeps failing to write his autobiography. He's too easily distracted with whatever memories most move him in the moment. Consequently, the book is written out of order and largely concerns his Uncle Toby and the other adults from his youth. By the end, you don't know much about Tristram, but you love the life he's lived because you look back on it as he does. Tristram Shandy was such a success, it spawned a spin-off novel, A Sentimental Journey. Published in 1768, a year before Sterne died, it concerns Parson Yorick, a secondary character from Tristram Shandy. At one point in the novel, Yorick is in France without a passport and fears he'll be jailed for not possessing one. He seeks the aid of an aristocrat, hoping that the Frenchman's love of England will depose him to arrange the necessary paperwork. Yorick and the aristocrat talk for a while before the aristocrat leaves the room, not indicating whether he'll help him or not. Unable to stand the stress, Yorick soothes himself by reading a copy of Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. As Yorick reads, he reflects on the essential role art has played in his life. In a moment, I'll provide these reflections, but first I should note that Aeneas and Dido he refers to are characters from the Roman epic, the Aeneid, a classic Yorick's time in the way Star Wars pervades our culture. In the Aeneid, Dido is in love with Aeneas and kills herself when he leaves her. Also, beating up is an antiquated phrase which means to recruit. With that context out of the way, please enjoy the following. I know of no more appropriate description of sailing away for the imagination connoisseur. Okay, I'm going to try this one. Sweet pliability of man's spirit, that can at once surrender itself to illusions, which cheat expectation and sorrow of their weary moments. Long, long since ye had numbered out my days, I had not trod so great a part of them upon this enchanted ground. When my way is too rough for my feet or too steep for my strength, I get off it to some smooth velvet path, which fancy has scattered over with rosebuds of delights, and having taken a few turns in it, come back strengthened and refreshed. When evils press sore upon me and there is no retreat from them in this world, then I take a new course. I leave it, and as I have a clearer idea of the Elysian fields than I have of heaven, I force myself, like Aeneas, into them, and I see him meet the pensive shade of his forsaken Dido, and I wish to recognize it. I see the injured spirit wave her head and turn off, silent, from the author of her miseries and dishonors. I lose the feelings for myself and hers, and in those affections which were wont to make me mourn for her when I was at school. Surely this is not walking in a vain shadow, nor does man disquiet himself in vain. By it he oftener does so in trusting the issue of his commotions to reason only. I can safely say for myself, I was never able to conquer any one single bad sensation in my heart so decisively as by beating up as fast as I could for some kindly and gentle sensation, to fight it upon its own ground. You have spoken at length, Rob, about how too many Hollywood executives do not understand the magic of movies. They do not understand art. In the above passage, Stern reminds us that art is not just entertainment. It is a richly layered experience that makes us kinder, gentler people. By this measure, the worst teacher out there is contemporary pop culture. What is the value of a classical education? Ask Lawrence Stern. It seemed to come in handy for him. Best, Isaac, September 19th, 2023. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when people write letters like this to me, I can't help but be humbled by it. I mean, this is a YouTube channel where I can bitch and moan and complain about Star Trek or Star Trek models, and then in the same hour, I get a letter like this to read. And this is actually what keeps me going on YouTube. This is why it's fun for me. This is why I enjoy it. And this is why, as Max Allen Collins would ask me, why I'm doing all kinds of different things, because I'm energized. I'm excited. You know, for all the let's face it, hopefully I'm going to have somebody on this week that I've had on before to talk about where the writer's strike is and where he's at. But there's a lot of frustrated people, and the world can really get you down. But my feeling has always been like, I'll be gone soon enough. You know, I want if the end of my life is home plate, I want to slide into that home plate with a martini in hand, with a little still left, not spilled all over the baseball diamond, take a sip, and, you know, like Kirk, it's been fun, right? I hope to go out that way at least. But getting letters like this, you know, make it all worthwhile. And, you know, I can't thank you enough for writing in, Isaac. What a great letter. And I've got more letters. But first of all, before I get to more letters, let me see if you guys have anybody has anything to say. Well, one person did. Scott Bartholomew said that William Marshall portrayed Frederick Douglass on stage. He did. I love William Marshall. He, of course, Dr. Richard Daystrom in the Star Trek episode The Ultimate Computer, which is always great to revisit. Building on my work. He was a great actor, and I loved him. He was fantastic, and he had a fantastic voice. And so... Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. I didn't think many people would be sending in super chats or tips for this show, but that's okay. I'm having fun, and that's all that matters. So this, let's see. This one comes from our friend Omar94. Hi, Rob, moderators in the Post-Geek Singularity. I wanted to recommend two lesser-known movies I think are underappreciated for everyone to possibly see, to potentially fill in the gap for the fact studios are not, they've halted new movies getting made, and how certain upcoming movies are being delayed. Just a heads up, I like these movies, but that doesn't mean others will, so you might think otherwise if you check them out. The 1947 noir film, They Won't Believe Me, starring Father Knows Best's Robert Young. It's about a stockbroker on trial for murdering his girlfriend who recounts the events leading up to her death to everyone in court. Sounds good to me. Then there's the 1965 mystery thriller Mirage, starring Gregory Peck and Walter Matthau. Directed by, I can't even pronounce this guy's last name, Edward Dimtrick, who made Crossfire and the Caine Mutiny. It's about an accountant who can't remember the last 2 years of life after his office building has a blackout and finds himself caught in the middle of a conspiracy with people coming after him after a rich humanitarian is killed. As I said earlier, I really like these movies, but that doesn't mean others will if they potentially check them out. Wait a minute, Omar. If you're going to say that you like these movies, you should stick up for them. You should say, watch these movies. They're good. That's why you're writing in and telling me, right? Stand by your convictions. By the way, this movie sounds great. I'm in. Mirage. Okay. Gregory Peck, what's not to love? I'll watch that movie. Because it sounds good to me. So, and I honestly, I've never heard about that movie before. So this one comes from Aaron Johnson. Aaron Johnson writes in, The French Connection, a commentary on why cop movies matter. Dear Rob, as someone who likes a variety of different action movies, it's kind of surprising hearing about how William Friedkin directed this film. What's nice is that I explained in an earlier chat, there was one particular scene from the film that Hackman explains in a 2008 interview where Hackman mentions about how he was having to chase a drug pusher, and it was hard for him to get into character because it was not like him, unlike actors like Clint Eastwood in action films like Dirty Harry. But the amusing part is Hackman was dressed in a Santa suit during the scene. Another scene was when he talked to Roy Scheider's character, Buddy Russo, in which the interaction between Russo and Doyle predates Scheider's character in Jaws, Brody, so you would think that they probably would have made the movie fun like Jaws by giving Russo a badass line similar to Brody. And that probably could have made the film better in a good way, meaning they would have had cops make respectful compromises, make good decisions on how they handled stopping criminals, etc. But as Hackman explained in the interview, they needed non-actors in the scene. Both Hackman and Scheider have terrific performances in the film, but people tend to not give Scheider enough credit for his role in the film like they do Hackman. He's amazing in the film, and I love Roy Scheider is one of my favorite actors. And one of my favorite movies in top 5 for me is All That Jazz, where he basically plays Bob Fosse, and he's absolutely incredible. If you haven't seen All That Jazz, I would dare say I also call it one of the great fantasy movies ever made too, but not like Lord of the Rings fantasy. Sometimes it's amazing how both of these actors had evolved as actors since this movie, but people tend to look at Scheider's role in this movie in the same way as Brody in the movie Jaws. They don't give Scheider enough credit in this movie like they do Brody in Jaws, because in Jaws, they give him badass lines where he's shooting the shark, and had the same thing happen with the French Connection with Russo, they probably would have helped with the Jaws blueprint for Brody, because in some ways, when looking at Jaws, it seems that in the follow-up to this film, The 7-Ups, you have a good retelling of Russo's story, but in the follow-up to 7-Ups, Scheider plays Buddy Minucci, which granted, why would I bring up Brody mixed in with this character? It's because in Jaws, Brody's a police chief, and they'd explain Brody's backstory as a cop. It probably would make sense because of the other Scheider characters like Russo and Minucci, and they go on like these are Brody archetypes talking to people when he's not getting in trouble with criminals. Let's face it, while Hackman's character is a learning curve type tough guy that is not liked, but Scheider's great too. So my question, Rob, do you think that Roy Scheider and Gene Hackman both had good performances in The French Connection? Sincerely, Aaron Johnson. Well, Aaron, I hope I got through that the way you wanted me to. Yes. Look, I think that the great William Friedkin's great power was coming out of documentary filmmaking was that he was able to bring a reality to everything that's going on. And one of the things I love about specifically movies of the 70s, especially movies set in that grungy New York, is that everybody seemed like Roy Scheider and Gene Hackman might not be the most handsome men in the world. I mean, Roy Scheider's a pretty handsome guy. I don't know if Gene Hackman ever considered himself handsome. I love his face, though. I'm a huge Gene Hackman fan. But they looked believable. You know, Friedkin was casting people that you looked at and you're like, these guys are New York. They could be New York cops. I mean, you had to believe them. You know, when you look at Riggs and Murtaugh in Lethal Weapon, I mean, both Danny Glover and Mel Gibson have a certain presence. They're both handsome men in their ways. And even though, Danny Glover's supposed to be older, he still has a power and a charisma to him. And, you take the gray out of his hair, he could be playing a very different kind of a part. And they were movie stars. Whereas you look at Hackman and you look at Roy Scheider, these guys look like workaday dudes in New York City. And that's why, and I think perhaps my favorite actor of that era, and I just watched the original taking of Pelham 123, is Hangdog Walter Matthau. Walter Matthau, maybe he wasn't the most handsome guy in the world, but he had a great face for movies. And that's what I loved. And I miss that. I think, honestly, our leading men are way too good looking. And a lot of the time their looks get in the way of the parts they're playing. We've become used to that. And I grew up in a time, verisimilitude. When I watched movies like The French Connection, total verisimilitude. And all those character actors, the New York actors, to me, like, that's one of the reasons I love Michael Mann's Thief, his first theatrical feature. And James Caan's almost too handsome to be in that movie. But he doesn't go cross that line. He's not necessarily a matinee idol, especially in that film. And it works. And if you look at all the other people that are in that movie that Michael Mann populated, he was using real cops and criminals to be in the film, to populate the film. And I think it worked really, really, really well. This letter comes to me from Rosemary. Dear Rob, I do like your show, and I'll continue to watch, although after this email, you'll be annoyed. I have to say, I don't like the material that some of your friends produce. The continued nasty comments about certain actresses and women in general. I live in the area where Joe Cox MP was brutally murdered during the Brexit debate. The murderer was groomed by far-right people. Language is very similar to what some YouTubers use. I have to admit to finding it very concerning. I can't do anything with regards to those who live overseas, but I will if I feel speech is breaking the law and considered grooming. I'll report the individuals to the police and to YouTube. Might sound harsh, but if it was Muslims saying the same things about Brie Larson and others using horrible language continuously about women, the police would have been knocking on their doors saying they were grooming people. Racism, bigotry, hatred toward women, different cultures, sexual differences is wrong. We can all still have freedom of speech, but these people are groomers. With all the new laws coming in, it doesn't matter what streaming platform they're on, these people will have to change. They're there to discuss movies, not say mean things, and they hate review a movie before a show has even been released. It's all part of a gender. Laws regarding hate speech is strict in the UK. Would not like to see another Joe Cox situation happen. Someone lost a mother and a wife. Many of us in the UK will not put up with this anymore. They will be reported to the police. Well, Rosemary, first of all, I want to thank you for writing in. And here's the thing. We live in sort of an interesting time where on one hand we have all of these platforms like YouTube, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Rumble, whether it's any myriad of other online platforms where people are sharing ideas. Now, we've had lots of bad ideas throughout human history, and yet there's also a lot of people on these platforms now espousing bad ideas, bad opinions, bad takes, also great takes. There's a lot of great speech, a lot of really fascinating, really interesting stuff happening. But there's also cults of personality. And I think, look, I obviously speak I obviously speak for myself. I don't speak for anybody else. But staying in this world, the world of entertainment, mostly I stick talking about Star Trek or Star Wars or movies in general, entertainment in general. I am no political scientist. I certainly don't have a grasp of economic theory the way people do. You know, I don't presume to know those things, and I wouldn't be opining on them. You're not going to see me becoming a crypto bro anytime soon. Let me tell you that. And telling other people how to spend their money when I can barely hang on myself. But look, I think your point's well taken. I think that there is a lot of hatred in the world. But I also think, look, there is a lot of, our entertainment and the way when creators of our entertainment, and this is what's happened in Star Trek, and I can speak to it, when the creators of franchises that we all know and love start literally saying that they're going to start using franchises to message as a messaging platform, their messaging platform, I think that it gives me pause, because I'm like, okay, well, first of all, what made you decide to do that? Why do you think that using a franchise for your messaging, what makes you think your messaging is worth sharing in the first place? This is where I think a lot of people push back, is that there's a lot out there, a lot of people out there that have decided to take our franchises in various ways and use them to do what? I mean, I don't like it I don't like when I get fraudulent stories. When you can tell that a story is literally being told specifically to, quite simply put, when stories are telling you what you should think. This is how you should think, rather than give you something to think about. That's the easiest answer. And I think there's a lot of people and there's a lot of corporations that are bandwagoning onto what's going on today, and they are very disingenuously trying to tell us what to think. And I think that's where a lot of the pushback comes from. And certainly there's a lot of people that perhaps are not polite about how they're pushing back against this, but I think it does need to be pushed back on. I really do. Because it's not good for anyone. And obviously, this was sort of disturbing to me yesterday. Obviously, the Russell Brand situation, which it's something I don't know much about. I've read the news like everybody else. But what I found greatly disturbing is that YouTube obviously demonetized Russell Brand. Oh, they're still happy to run his videos, but they demonetized him. And in their statement, they said something that I found incredibly chilling. And they said, when creators are not using our platform, when they're off platform, the way they're leading their lives, if the way that they're leading their lives harm our ecosystem or harm people that are part of the YouTube family, I'm paraphrasing, well, then we have to take action. And I, as a YouTube creator, I'm like, well, there's a lot of people that can't stand my take on new Star Trek, new Trek. Now, if somebody doesn't like me in the real world, like if I'm off doing something else that has nothing to do with YouTube or this show, is YouTube or Google now going to take it upon themselves? Is the status of this channel now dependent on what I'm doing in my private life? What if they find out that I have some really specific furry predilections? I don't. But let's say I did. I really don't. But, somebody, what if I went to some kind of an orgy, from a bacchanal, some kind of amazing hedonistic orgy in Germany, and that very famous multi-story German sex club people talk about? What if I bumped into somebody there that somebody didn't like, what I look like if I came out dressed as a satanic worshiper or something? I'm not saying I'm going to do that. But what if I did and somebody didn't like that and they reported me to YouTube, and then YouTube said, oh, well, we don't like how you patronize sex clubs in Germany, so we think you're harming the community, and they deplatform me. That's what YouTube was saying last night. Now, I know the Russell Brand situation is fraught with peril, and we're talking about, and if he's guilty of the things that he's been accused of, lock him up and throw away the key. But allow due process its course to run its course. And I think that it's a little scary when you see big tech, between them taking and telling us what we're supposed to think. Now they're going to go after our private lives. All of it's all part of the modern age. And look, I think we have to keep the conversation on all these things going. And I think that the ethical, moral, political, and social implications of what we have wrought here need to be carefully considered, and we need to have a discussion about all this stuff. It's not just AI. The fact that we are being controlled, and how we're being controlled, and eventually every one of us is going to find ourselves at some point in Franz Kafka's The Trial. You know, we're not going to know what we're accused of. We're all going to wake up in some dystopian nightmare where we find ourselves in a black and white cell where they've thrown away a proverbial key. And I think, look, the important thing is we need to have the discussion. It needs to be ongoing, and we have to be able to talk to one another, even the people we might vehemently disagree with. We have to have that conversation all the time. And if we're demonizing people because of just their beliefs, not their actions, but their beliefs, I fear that if we're going to stop talking to people, or we're going to lock them up, things are going to get bad really fast. And I think the greatest way to combat bad ideas is to have them in the open. Keep the discussion going. Bad ideas will die in the light of reason. They always do. And the problem is now is where are the reasonable people? I don't know. But listen, I want to thank you for writing in, and know that I don't disagree with you. We need civility in a civil society in order to function. And, this one comes from Jed Jensen. Let me just look and see if anybody has anything else to say. Actually, yes, people do. Scott Bartholomew has been firing in a bunch of stuff. Let me see what we got going on here. Let's see. First of all, hang on. Let me catch up with everybody. Ahsoka Sleepwalker sends in a tip and says, Rob, this is what happens when socialists try and be capitalists. Imagine if they tried pulling this off in the mirror universe. It wouldn't go very far. Scott Bartholomew says, what's the status of 10 and 20? I kind of got derailed with 10 and 20, but it's coming. Hopefully next week. Julian Mushkin, how are you, sir? Julian Mushkin sends in a tip and says the letter regarding Aeneas and Dido mentions to beat up. In sailing, one can beat up, which is sailing as close into the wind as possible. Close-hauled. Seems that going against the grain or wind is the point of the song. I love that. See? I learn something new every day. Thanks for that, Julian. I didn't know that. See how I learned? This show's the best. It's the best for me. I don't know if this one's the best for you. Scott Bartholomew says, I'd like to see a remake of Fantastic Voyage. You know, James Cameron was going to do one. I mean, you got Inner Space. You know what? Here, this is going to seem weird, but my big problem with Fantastic Voyage has always been that you can see too much. It's too bright inside the human body. I mean, if you went inside the human body, it'd be dark. But yeah, I think a remake of Fantastic Voyage with today's effects would be very, very, very cool. I'd love to see that. I don't know, as long as it would be compelling. I think it'd be great. I'd love to see that. Scott goes on to say, what is your opinion on the future of Star Trek? I would like Star Trek to get back to its core values. I would like it to be a science fiction, first and foremost, action adventure, allegorical show that had characters that I loved, that were involved in really interesting science fiction situations, that were exciting, that were thoughtful, that were illuminating, that left me thinking when the episode was over and contemplative of what I'd watched. I'd like to see that. And, I think it's possible to do that again. I think you need to hire writers that are really well-versed in science fiction. And, I was actually thinking, I did that show the other day. I don't know, really. I mean, I think the second season of Foundation, the thing about Star Trek is it's got to be original. It's not based on anything else. I was trying to think of, okay, who would I put together? I have a lot of friends that I think would be great, that are great science fiction writers. They're great writers already. They have a lot of experience in TV and film. My friend Zach Stentz, for instance, who was tapped to write a Wheel of Time movie. I think Zach Stentz, he did write a lot with Ashley Miller. They wrote on everything from Fringe and Andromeda. I think Zach Stentz, who's also very well-versed in history and things like that, would be a great addition to any Star Trek writing staff. I would start with him. And he's been a TV writer for, the better part of 20 years now. And him and Ashley wrote together, and now they've been writing apart. They even wrote a novel together. 2 novels, but only one of them's been published. I would get him. I'd start with him, and I would build a writing staff that would come up with really interesting. I'll tell you something. There's a science fiction novel by Greg Bear, who's written a lot of stuff I like, but there was a book called Blood Music. And it was, when I was a story analyst at CAA, the screenwriter who wrote The Man Who Lived with the Sea. I forget his name. See, I can't. There's so much. Anyway, something who lived with the sea. The guy who wrote that movie. I think maybe even wrote and directed it. Why can't I think of the name? It's a long name. But he wrote a draft of this script based on Greg Bear's book, Blood Music. And the script wasn't perfect, but it's got such a wild sci-fi concept. And it's the kind of, I would love to see a movie like Blood Music get made. I don't know if it would necessarily, if someone said, well, it's got such a weird idea behind it that it would be awesome to visualize. I would love to have had like David Cronenberg to have directed Blood Music as his follow-up instead of doing Dead Ringers. Not to take Dead Ringers away from him because I think it's probably his best movie, but if he made Blood Music in the 80s, because it's a body horror, it's a great body horror science fiction film that actually has kind of a 2001 element in it. But that's the kind of stuff I would like to see. I'd like to see stuff like that. And where are the science fiction ideas? Like the neural parasites in Operation Annihilate, which is the last episode of the first season of Star Trek, when you had these, they're on Deneva, and this brain that was broken into these different brain cells, they're the plastic vomit that sticks on people's backs. I mean, Star Trek had really wild sci-fi concepts, and they would play out these really interesting stories. And you'd think about the fact that they this brain, this disembodied brain, was traveling from place to place trying to get somewhere. I always thought that they should do a sequel. Where was it trying to get? What happens if it got to where it was going, and why was it going there? I mean, I don't know. We never got that. But that's what I'd like to see, Scott, from the future of Star Trek. I don't foresee that, but that's what I would like to see. I really would. Now, the letter I was going to read. So here we go. Back to Jed Jensen, who writes this article. And this was from last week. He wrote this on September 13th. So it was, days ago. Dear R&B, this would be the 5th episode of Ahsoka. After last night's episode of Ahsoka, I feel utterly confused. I hated it. To me, it felt like the emptiest, most meaningless member berries I've ever seen. Maybe it's because I never liked the prequels or the Clone Wars, despite trying to watch them many, many times with friends who've tried to convert me. This isn't necessarily a problem with the Ahsoka series as a whole. I love the last episode because we got to see some legitimately great character conflict, both within Ahsoka, Sabine, and Baylan, but also between each of them. Pardon my crassness, but last night's episode replaced character conflict with the most obvious lazy fan service blowjob in Star Wars history, leaving us drowning in Dave Filoni's filthy self-insert fanfic jizz. Wow. Last night wasn't a story about the human heart, an intelligent dissection of the body politic, or an insightful historical allegory. It was a reward to fans who feel entitled to being serviced because they saw a children's cartoon or read some Wikipedia articles. If I sat a newcomer to Star Wars down to last week's episode, or Andor, or the first season of The Mandalorian, or many other projects, they would totally be able to understand the characters and be sucked up in their journeys. They might be lost on some of the specific plot points or not grasp the import of certain pieces of lore, but they'll still be able to have a good time. If I sat this hypothetical Star Wars virgin down to last night's episode of Ahsoka, they would be lost and totally uninvested. Why does Ahsoka need to learn this lesson? She hasn't really been all that conflicted about the role the Jedi had in the Clone Wars. She hasn't been afraid that she'll become a violent sociopath like her master. She hasn't suffered from any paralytic indecisiveness. So live or die is less of a deep personal lesson and more of a basic statement of logic. A is A. You cannot have your cake or eat it too. Live or die. This isn't even touching on how it looked like a shitty 2009 fan film, or how Hayden Christensen and Rosario Dawson looked and sounded like they were in a contest to see who could give the flatter performance. And whatever this lesson that Ahsoka needed to be taught so badly, why was it taught via mind-numbingly boring lightsaber fights instead of through sharp dialogue? To sum up, I felt I was drowning in a sweaty nerd bukkake of empty self-referentialism. Oh, Jed, my boy. I gotta read that again. To sum up, I felt I was drowning in a sweaty nerd bukkake of empty self-referentialism. I feel that every day. The reason I'm confused isn't because of a shitty episode of TV, but instead to the reaction to it by many fans. I can't begin to count the number of people frothing at the mouth over how seen they feel. People are crying over Anakin and Ahsoka standing next to each other, folding their arms. It's like poetry, it rhymes. Fans are declaring Anakin flashing back and forth with Vader in the smoke to be the greatest shot of not only Star Wars, but as all of cinema. Thank you, Dave Filoni, the only one who understands Star Wars. I feel like I've stumbled into somebody emotionally jerking off to extreme fetish porn, and then I was the one who got shamed because I wasn't into it. It's especially strange to me since so many of these people have been criticizing other Star Wars projects, like Andor and The Last Jedi, for drawing on Star Wars for inspiration, where the original Star Wars projects drew on westerns, samurai films, etc. To me, this episode was the thing they've actually been afraid of. A blowjob Ouroboros of biblical proportions. Nice. All this episode had to say was, remember Star Wars? I like Star Wars. Do you remember this? Do you love this? The closest Filoni has to an outside inspiration is the transformation of Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White, but he fundamentally misunderstands this change. Gandalf doesn't have a near-death experience followed by a wardrobe change. He actually dies, and he does so to sacrifice himself for his friends. Friends who, against his counsel, led themselves to a deadly situation. He willingly gives up his life to defeat a great evil, and then instead of finally being able to rest, he is given a last charge by the Valar to return to the world of the living to fight the corruption of evil spreading throughout Middle-earth. He's far more serious because he's already made the ultimate sacrifice and is now the personification of devotion to a higher cause. That's actually a great analogy. Ahsoka captures none of this. Instead, just being a hollow, self-insert character that Filoni will never let die. Yet fans don't care. They just say, "Oh my God, he understands the lore!" That's the biggest approximation I could say to how you wrote that. Upset over this hypocrisy of fans who claim to want Star Wars, draw inspiration from outside sources, I decided to crack open the Art of the Last Jedi book and flip through its pages, taking note of every time something other than Star Wars was cited as a reference for a plot point, character, set design, costume, hairstyle, etc. Want to hear the list of all the references? No? Too bad. I'm saying them anyway. Vertical Warfare, Forbidden Planet, Rashomon, Earth from Above, Ron, Armed Forces, The Hidden Fortress, Casablanca, Flash Gordon, Jurassic Park, The Lost World, 12 O'Clock High, 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Casino at Monte Carlo, The Wild Bunch, Blade Runner, Three Outlaw Samurai, The Edge of the World, Sahara, To Catch a Thief, The Apartment, Vertigo, Citizen Kane, Wings, The Wizard of Oz, The Lord of the Rings, Black Narcissus, Gunga Din, The Sound of Music, Dawn Patrol, Apocalypse Now, Madame Butterfly, The Lady from Shanghai, Yojimbo, The Bridge on the River Kwai, Brazil, Goldfinger, The Spy Who Loved Me, Buck Rogers, Letter Never Sent, Fargo, The Long Goodbye, Kagamusha, Twin Peaks, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, The Haunted Mansion, Paralandra, C.S. Lewis, yes, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and The Young Ones. This is a list of TV shows, paintings, album covers, books, and plays. Some of them are famous and influential, some of them are obscure gems, but it's clear that, by the way, since you brought up Paralandra, where is the C.S. Lewis space trilogy? Come on, man. That Hideous Strength is a great Out of the Silent Planet, Paralandra, and That Hideous Strength. Where's that fucking trilogy? Come on, man. They're making Greta Gerwig's doing Narnia again, but where's the C.S. Lewis space trilogy? Come on, man. My aunt got me the slipcase paperbacks. It was awesome. I mean, it'd be a little weird, but still, come on, man. Anyway, that's just an aside. Some of these movies and things are obscure gems, but it's clear that Rian Johnson is a well-read cinephile who, like the best artists, steals liberally from his favorite sources. Sadly, it seems that Dave Filoni can only steal from Star Wars because it's all he knows. And his diehard fans are the exact same. I can't sit down with these cultists and discuss David Lynch movies, who almost directed Return of the Jedi, or the latest sci-fi book I read. These are people who look down on Andor because it didn't feel like Star Wars. They're uncultured man-babies who want Star Wars to be nothing but what they experienced growing up so that they can feel safe and secure wrapped in their warm, fuzzy blanket of nostalgia. Ultimately, it's hard to be too upset with Lucasfilm for catering to such a loud audience, but it makes me sad that Star Wars fandom has such warped standards. Lord of the Rings fans rejected Rings of Power. Marvel fans rejected much of Phase 4. Harry Potter fans rejected The Cursed Child and the Fantastic Beasts films. Star Wars fans? They're noisily slurping down their cheap slop. So this is how great storytelling in Star Wars dies, with thunderous applause. Why do I write all of this? It's not only to vent about the apparent upcoming demise of my favorite franchise, but also for your perspective. What are some works of art that you think all Star Wars creators should be familiar with before leaving their imprint on this galaxy? Is there anything specific you think should have been used as a touchstone for this story? Off the top of my head, I would have liked to have seen Ahsoka share Hamlet's infamous indecisive nature. We know she didn't help the rebellion in the original trilogy, outside of a bit of help in Rebels, nor did she fight the First Order in the sequel trilogy, which she totally could have, seeing as Filoni insists she might be alive after the rise of Skywalker. Why not have her be plagued by the consequences of her past actions? And now she's terrified to commit to one cause or the other. Maybe she thinks her being involved will make things worse. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. It certainly would have made the live or die lesson actually have a meaningful impact on Ahsoka. Anyways, I've babbled on for long enough. Do you agree or disagree? And to what story should we turn to, both as creators and as fans? Sincerely, the Star Wars fans who hates Ahsoka Tano. It comes to us from Jed Jensen. Jed, fantastic letter, man. Listen, I mean, I think you really kind of said it all. You know, I've often thought, as I've said, I think Star Wars is all about Star Wars now. I don't think it's about anything else. Andor was about something else. Andor gave us a glimpse into how rebellions begin and how, I mean, you can look at that show. I loved Andor because they gave us a glimpse of what does the workaday empire look like. You know, all we knew, it's so funny to me. Andor did something that I didn't think I would see in Star Wars anymore. And that was, it went back to the spirit of the original Star Wars. In that Star Wars was about, as I've said a million times on the show, about a farmer and a truck driver. Workaday blue-collar dudes that get swept up in this battle between good and evil, between the Empire and the Rebellion, but they're workaday guys. And they're us. That's the thing about Star Wars. It was a fairy tale about its audience. We were Luke or Han. Now, maybe we weren't as cool as Han, you know, but Han was still a, or as Lando says, Han. They're workaday guys. You know, they work for a living, as people would say. And that's why Star Wars, I think, was so effective. They were the every person. And when Star Wars got up its own ass in terms of its own ridiculous lore, the problem is all of this Jedi lore and all this crap, the world between worlds, I don't give a fuck. It's not Star Wars. It's something else. It's fantasy. I know Star Wars is a space fantasy, but it has its roots in the real world. And the more we get in, like you eloquently pointed out, what is all these things that Ahsoka wants or whatever? Look, our audience, Star Wars is a lot more sophisticated. Empire Strikes Back, even Jedi, is a lot more sophisticated than people give it credit for. You bring up Hamlet. You know, Star Wars, look at what Lucas was looking for. And even, look, I think that Rian Johnson, I think that Last Jedi could have been a good movie, but it's all over the place in terms of its tone, and I would have restructured the film. I would have opened the movie with Rose Tico and Finn and made it a Bond movie opening. Drop right in the middle that Rose Tico was not, you know, she was a badass. She was like Michelle Yeoh in Tomorrow Never Dies. And you would have watched them. They would have been on a mission. You would have done a Bond opening, and it would have been badass. And you would have shown Finn being bad, and Rose Tico could have been badass, and they would have been heroic. And they're looking for Benicio del Toro, and you play that out, and they have to get him back by a certain time to get what they need. And at the same time, and then once they've succeeded and head off, then you see the rebels being routed. Because it makes no sense that they leave in the middle of that movie. I think one of the biggest problems of Last Jedi is the structure. And, you know, they needed to focus on, it's weird. The movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of its structure, and it does silly things. But I do think the confrontation between Luke and Kylo Ren, the most Jedi shit in the world, is Luke not even being there. And if they played that off more and they did more with it's just, it's a mess. I think it's a mess of a movie. But I don't think it's as horrible as people make it out to be. But it's a mess, no doubt. And Luke's character, again, out of character. And people object to what they did to Luke. I don't think the whole idea behind, because Luke mirrors Ben Kenobi. They just don't have a reason for it, and it seems stupid because in Ben Kenobi's case, he was looking out for Luke. And Luke left the person he should have been looking out for. But it's... be that as it may, what would I if I was tasked to make a Star Wars movie, I would look to things like I, Claudius. You know, I'd look at Michael Mann's Heat, or like I said earlier, Thief. Go to crime thrillers. You know, look at The Godfather. The problem with Star Wars is it's completely removed from our experience as human beings. And the thing about Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, they were not. We recognize them as us. I don't know fuck all about what a Jedi Knight does. I look at Ahsoka Tano and I'm like, okay, she's an animated character. I mean, all these characters are amalgamations of things, but I don't feel any connection to them at all. I know some people do because, you grow up fans of Clone Wars and you grow up fans of Rebels and all that. But again, everything's become so insular. It's only about itself. The Star Wars universe is only about itself. It no longer reaches back to our world or to us as people. We're now watching characters in fictional universes, and everyone loves the Star Wars universe. So people love Star Wars, and they don't even know that it doesn't matter that those characters have no connection to the human world, our world. But all storytelling relates back to us as human beings. If you're watching a story, I think your frustration is that there's nothing going on in Ahsoka that has anything to do with our world, metaphorically or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter to us. You're just watching the machinations of the Star Wars universe. And for some people, that's enough. I get it. But not for me. I want more. And that's why I was so tuned into Andor. Why? Because all of us, I got Luthen, and I got Mon Mothma. My favorite parts of the show were Luthen and Mon Mothma. And everybody else. I mean, I felt for Mon Mothma. I thought a politician playing both sides against the middle and always under fear of being, it was like a great political thriller. It was like watching something that was set in East Berlin during the Cold War. I love that. And I related to it. I'm like, I recognize this. And I think the people that watch Andor are and again, I think it's a generational thing. And I think that, the fantasy aspects of all of it, I totally understand. I get it. But for me, it has no meaning. It does not resonate. I watch it because I have to talk about it. I'm like, fine. But I don't buy into any of it. I'm like, what is the point of any of this? What does it all mean? I honestly, hey, it's cool to see Hayden Christensen come back, but why? What lesson? Is this a lesson that Ahsoka doesn't already know? What am I supposed to be learning from this? Not much. So I want to say, though, thank you. I thought that was a great letter. And thank you for writing in. I appreciate it. This letter comes from Yellow Cat. Yellow Cat says, your man Az has really fucked up and misjudged England and the internet. Firstly, only minorities support that shit. Yes, it's conservative, but as Joe Biden, who would fit well in the Tory party, far right tend to be in the minority, and yes, people voted Brexit, but that was because of lies told by Murdoch and his cronies, who tend to be kingmakers in England. Az was not known in England, now he will be for all the wrong reasons. He's going to be known as a stupid old baldy pronoun guy. I believe he lives in the Leeds, Sheffield area. He does not, which has a big student population who are going to be the people who are mostly seen and create the memes. Also, nobody canceled him. People are laughing at him for being stupid with regards to pronouns. God help him when he reads a book. They're everywhere. Forget about gaming. He's really misjudged everything. As much as I dislike what he did, I feel sorry for the guy, as this is not going to go away, as I see memes from 10-year-olds. He's definitely fucked up his career in England. Also, your other mate, the critical drinker, he is no way as popular as you think he is. He's in Scotland. They bloody hate him, those that heard about his show. He doesn't have fans in the country, as it's further left than Bernie Sanders. He's known as a Neil Oliver clown. They kicked most of the conservatives out of the country. He will end up leaving in the future as his fan base is in the USA and elsewhere. He probably knows this, and he doesn't. And if he doesn't, then he's an idiot. Not a rant about you, but to explain how different things are here and why your mates are not the big G here as they are elsewhere in the world, and that Az and Babyface really fucked himself in the arse. Well, listen, on that note, I want to say, Yellow Cat, thank you for writing in. Second of all, again, I've said this before, Az is a friend of mine, as is the drinker. And, I reject what you're saying because, again, primarily the focus of both Az and the Critical Drinker are analyzing entertainment, video games, toys, whatever. And I'm proud of the work that I've done with both of them. I would suggest that you go back and you listen to what Az and I did in terms of we did 18 episodes analyzing The Prisoner. Now, Az and I can come from diametrically different political viewpoints, but I think that we meet on we're of the same mind on many different subjects, as I do with the Critical Drinker. And I never got a sense from the Drinker that he thinks he's some big deal. Look, his YouTube channel has over 1 million subscribers because I think he does very good story analysis. I think watching his videos, you can learn about storytelling. He's a novelist himself. You can learn about structure. And like someone like Doomcock, he's playing a part. He's playing the Drinker the same way that the Red Letter Media guys were doing Plinkett. Mike was doing Plinkett for a long time, which I loved. And I understand. I mean, I don't think that I think that Az and the Drinker both are smart guys. And while you might disagree with how they approach things sometimes, again, I stand by the streams I've done with both of them. I've had great talks with the Critical Drinker, especially about Star Trek The Motion Picture, or the original Alien. And all we're doing is analyzing storytelling. And, people can be crass. People can be rude. I think that Az has a bit of a punk rocker in him, frankly. I would love to have hung out in London in the 70s with him. We would have had a blast. We probably would have had a lot of broken bones and bloody noses, but we would have drank a lot of booze and had a lot of fun. So, I mean, and I don't think outside the YouTube space anybody really is looking. You make it sound like both the Drinker and Az are some kind of political figures. I don't necessarily see them as such, but I like them both very much, and I consider them friends of mine. And I'll still stream with them whenever possible. I've really enjoyed doing that, and I think it's fun to stream with them. Sebastian Walther Rivera writes in. This is an interesting letter. Hi, Rob. I've been listening to your contributions on Star Trek on both your own account and the other channels such as Nerdrotics. I think you nail what Star Trek is about and what it means and communicates to people born before 2000, for the lack of a better description. Listening to your Strange New Worlds rant, which I 95% agree on, I'd like to give you some food for thought. Star Trek has always been a communist utopia, maybe even being set up for success for the powers that be to be so. So I agree, it is a parallel universe to aspire to. But AG's comments on the latest episode, is it possible they're doing this to align our own world's path toward this future? I.e., we need to keep it relevant and we're heading towards it. I love the idealized world of Star Trek, a future of hope. But then I grew up and realized that the world is a lot more complex than this utopia. Deep Space Nine, in my opinion, got a lot closer to human reality than all the other shows did. My favorite Star Trek show. I think that's partly because of the not-so-clean, happy setup and later on war setup it was situated in. Bottom line, is it possible that Akiva Goldsman and his hacks are just executing the next iteration of the script and plan? Make communism great again, if you wish? As I mentioned, these are my thoughts. I think your knowledge of Star Trek far exceeds mine and most people's, so I'm happy to hear your thoughts and stand corrected. Cheers, and thanks for reading through this entire rant. Sebastian, I thought it was good, Sebastian. I think what you ask is a very pertinent, it's a very pertinent question. It's a very topical question. Was Star Trek portraying a communist utopia? Here's the thing. The reason Star Trek was not portraying a communist utopia is it believed in the individual. Star Trek believed, even Picard even says it at one point, what the future is all about bettering oneself. Star Trek, if nothing else, is about the excellence of the human individual and how the human individual must achieve. and how we strive to be better, not just the collective. The collective, I mean, if anything, it's more of, I suppose, a socialist utopia, but it's certainly it's a post-scarcity culture, so capitalism is sort of a thing of the past. When you have replicator technology and you can make things, Picard even says it in the same speech. He says, look, we're not looking after things anymore. When you can actually pursue your interests because you don't have to worry about getting a roof over your head, you don't have to worry about food, these things, the society's given them to you so you can pursue other things. When you have a whole galaxy to explore, you can do anything. And I think that what the human utopia is really all about in Star Trek, at least the way I see it, is to explore the potential of humanity. What is it possible for people to do? And also, I'm one of those people that believes that the universe has given rise to life such as ours because we give the universe the voice it can't itself have. I know that's kind of a weird idea, but I mean, the universe is going to be here for literally trillions and trillions of years, and yet it doesn't have a voice. There's no one who will mark its passing except life such as our own. And I think that that's what we're here for. And when you're able to explore the imagination, or we're able to explore different dimensions, or we're able to do all of those different kinds of things, where literally we're exploring existence itself, that to me is what Star Trek is all about. And how does being able to explore this kind of thing, existence, how does it relate back to the human spirit, the human soul? What does it mean for us? We unfortunately here on the earth are for better or worse, are so locked into our petty differences because we're stuck. We're stuck in these places where there's very little wonder, there's very little hope, there's very little aspirational looking toward the future. Most of the world can barely find enough food to eat on a daily basis. We're lucky. Well, I live in America. I'm lucky to live here. Even California, it's a paradise compared to most of the rest of the world. And yet, we don't even see it. We don't even take it for granted. And I think Star Trek, that future, is about the human civilization has learned how to do these things. And it's not communist because it's about us, each individual, bettering themselves to be who and what they really want to be, unfettered by the constraints of daily life. If you have a replicator and you can just punch in what you want to eat or drink and you don't have to worry about your meal, you can concentrate on your art, or you can concentrate on whatever it is you want to pursue. And we don't have that luxury. And that's what the Star Trek universe is all about. And that's what's and the fact that we can go out and converse and interact with other individuals throughout the universe. And the funny thing, everyone talks about, well, Deep Space Nine is so dark. The great thing that I loved about Deep Space Nine is, how does a post-scarcity utopian civilization deal with people that want to come in and fuck your shit up? That's something that no one ever talks about. Like, yeah, humanity created this utopia, and we're the Federation, we're able to put it together. But what happens when someone comes and says, we want to fuck you up, we want to destroy your Federation? Well, what do utopians do? And to me, Deep Space Nine was all about, how do you retain your humanity without allowing a horrible evil to consume you and lose everything that you've built? How do you do that? And everyone cites in the pale moonlight, and I think people are always, when Sisko has his glass and he says, I can live with it. I can live with it. And the episode ends. No, he can't. The whole point of that episode is he'll never be able to live with what he did. He knows he had to do it because he had to put an end to the war. He'll never forget it. He'll be haunted by it till the end, till he stops living in corporeal existence, until he goes to the wormhole aliens. But that's why the episode is chilling, and it shows the cost of war on a utopian soul. I mean, look at what Sisko already endured. He was already a survivor of horrible trauma. The Battle of Wolf 359 and the same, how many thousands of people suffer that trauma. We saw Todd Stashwick play that very, very well in Picard season 3, decades later, there's still people that are haunted by, I mean, it was so great. He was just randomly picked to get on a shuttle. Why? He's got survivor's guilt, and it was amazing to see, and he played it beautifully. You know, I think people are like, well, it goes against Roddenberry's. Well, yeah, because Roddenberry was showing us an uplifting show. But you can't do that every time. And, you know, I think that Deep Space Nine, it showed people that were trying to hold on to their utopian civilization in the face of a great onslaught of horribleness. But I don't think, I think, look, the people today who think communism is a good thing, and you hear like, oh, you know, it just hasn't been implemented correctly. Communism will never, ever work because it does not allow the individual to achieve. And, you know, I keep thinking about this NPR story I heard about this ashram or this, you know, whatchamacallit, when like a kibbutz, a collective. These people went, I want to say it was in the late 60s. It was a really interesting story. And they were going to create this collective and, you know, everyone's going to be equal. You know what fucked it up? When they had kids. This perfect ashram or whatever, it was all great and it was all kumbaya and it was all working until people had kids. And they wanted things for their children. They wanted their kids to excel. Suddenly their parental instincts kicked in. And then it destroyed everything. Communism will never work because it doesn't have the individual or allow for the individual. And I think right now, why are people embracing it? Because a lot of young people are lost. They don't know what to do. They don't have places to go. People don't even want to fuck anymore. Where's the ambition? You know, you have to find that yourself. No one can give you something you want to do. You know, no one can tell you. And nowadays we're not. And I think so much of our political discourse or our online discourse is because, you know what satisfied? You can go online and you can bitch and moan and rail at somebody and it makes you feel good. And you're like, I've accomplished something today. I did right. I went after that creepy old man, Rob Burnett, and I told him that he can fuck off because he doesn't like new Star Wars or Star Trek. And they feel better about themselves, which I understand. But what have they really accomplished? And the thing is, when they go to bed at night, they don't feel any different. They might for a little bit, but it's not genuine. What's genuine is if you go out and you accomplish something you want to do that took you a while to do it. You put some time and effort and elbow grease. You created something from nothing. That's when people, and that's why I think we're lost. So many people are lost, especially I see younger people. You know, the world is a weird place. I'm not really understanding how I'm supposed to be, and I'm feeling odd, and I'm feeling out of sorts, or I'm feeling like an outsider. Maybe I'm non-binary. Maybe you are. And then you have a ready-made community for you that's going to tell you to be non-binary. But really what it is you're still dealing with what you have inside you that is unresolved. What you need to do is you need to figure shit out, and people aren't doing that anymore. You have to figure out, like, what is it you want to be? You know, it's weird, the thing like the non-binary, I think about that because of Star Trek, Call Me They, in the 32nd century. But I can't imagine what it would be like to think of yourself as being non-binary, because that's even, you've removed yourself even further away from being something. You're not declaring who you are. You're declaring that you're not something, which is weird to me. And I understand maybe it just gives people a little bit more time to figure things out. But I don't relate to that. It's hard for me. Like, I always knew I wanted to make movies from the time I was a little kid. And if not make movies, do something, have something to do with storytelling and people. Something that was social, because I love working in retail and all that. But I think one of the problems today is, you know, it's easy to get your quick fix by being a performance activist on social media. You get a big jolt out of it. I did something good today. I saved people from the evils of this world by going online and combating people. And then, you know, eventually that's going to wear off. And I think that one of the reasons people find communism, that collective, we're going to have a group. We're going to do what? Like, some guy came after me online and said, our generation has done more, meaning, I guess, Generation Z, has done more to advance our civilization than anything that's happened in the last 500 years. And I'm like, you know, we have more tolerance, more this. I'm like, do you really believe that? Really? I mean, did you get the women right to vote? Did you make same-sex marriage happen? Did you fight the civil rights? Were you at Stonewall? Did you do any of that? No. You know, and it's really interesting that's where it's at. You know, unless you figure out a way to fulfill yourself, you have to figure out what it is you like to do. What do you want to do? What do you dream of doing? And when you start doing those things on your own, who you are will start to snap into place. You'll figure it out. And then you have something that you're going to pursue. And then all this other cacophony of noise that seems important. I'm going to go fight the good fight. The way to fight the good fight is to find out who and what you are and what you want to be and what you're going to contribute to the world and to yourself. And if everybody could do that on an individual basis, well then, because you find out once you want to do that, you want to interact with other people that are doing the same thing. Because I would imagine that you need other people to help you realize whatever it is you're going to do. And we have more tools, we have more talent, we have more technology to make whatever you want happen than we've ever had. And yet we're all bitching and moaning and complaining about everything online. I'm like, go do something. What do you want to do? Figure it out and go do it. We have more power. You can wield more power now than any individual has ever had in the history of humanity. Go make that happen. You've got, it's right here. And you can do it. No one can tell you that you can't. It's just doing it's hard. Sticking with it. Having the wherewithal to figure out what it is you want to do and making it happen. That's the key. And the thing is, you making it happen not for the accolades, not for people to pat you on the back, but you do it for yourself. You do it because you feel fulfilled doing it. And real fulfillment is not something that is fleeting. Real fulfillment stays with you. And, yeah. At least I think. I could be wrong. What do you think? Tell me in the messages below. This one's a tough one. You know what? I'm going to end with this, but let me see what you guys are saying first, and see where we are at. So let me see. Gosh, a lot of you guys are see all of a sudden you guys are loquacious again. Eduardo Ramirez says, Did you wish BS a happy 58th for us on the 17th? That's Brian Singer. His birthday was on the 17th, and I didn't get to speak with him personally to wish him a happy birthday. But hey, you know what? Let's call him now. Why not? Let's see.
I'm sorry, the person you are trying to reach has a voicemail box that has...
His phone's turned off. But I'll continue on. Yes, I haven't been able to get a hold of him. Glenn Mark says, one of three, audio dramas are fantastic. I worked in that field and I adore it. Pictureless films, sound effects paint vivid images in the theater of one's mind. Well, I too grew up listening to the CBS Radio Mystery Theater Presents, and that was hosted by E.G. Marshall. I loved it, and so doing this, that's what I'm involved in. Kind of like, what you hear with the Sandman audio dramas. That's what we're doing, and I'm involved with Max Allan Collins himself, and he is writing it, and it's based on his works. Actually, I can say it because we're doing it. I'm going to be producing and directing audio dramas based on his Nathan Heller series. Nathan Heller started out in the 30s as a flatfoot, as a detective in the Chicago PD, later became Detective to the Stars. And there are 17 Heller books, and the 18th is going to be published on October 10th, and it's called Too Many Bullets. And more on that later. But we are going to be producing Heller audio dramas that are going to probably be anywhere from 3 to 6 hours long. And wait till you hear who's going to be in it. Wait till you hear who's going to be in it. Hopefully. We'll talk about that later. So without blatant narration, it becomes a wonderful challenge describing landscapes, environments, and vistas through audio dialogue and making that dialogue natural. It is a delicious skill set to master. I am hyped for this, Rob. I can't wait for this. Oh, wait till you see it. It's going to be, or hear it. It's going to be great. Eduardo Ramirez says, what is your most or least favorite Bryan Singer movie? That's a good question. I think my favorite Bryan Singer movies are Usual Suspects and X-Men Days of Future Past. And my least favorite, sorry, Brian, is probably Jack the Giant Slayer. Although there's a lot of cool stuff in there. I just feel like Brian's, maybe his heart wasn't in it as much as it should have been. I think, everyone takes paycheck jobs. Why not? Don't get pissed, Brian. But he's made a lot of movies that I go back and revisit. Like, I think Valkyrie is a lot better than people remember it being. I think it's really good. And I really like Apt Pupil. Zequinox says, I grew up in the early 2000s, prequels, Lord of the Rings, great childhood. As an adult in the 2010s, Lord of the Rings is better than Game of Thrones. Star Wars equals Star Wars. No equivalent was made in sci-fi outside of The Expanse that made us itch. I would tend to agree with you. There's been some great sci-fi. I think Battlestar Galactica was really good, the Battlestar Galactica remake, but it wasn't perfect. I don't know necessarily. Like, I love Denis Villeneuve's Dune, but like I've said, it's cut to the bone. You can't. The scenes are all good, but you can't really get into the characters because there's no breathing room in Dune. But I agree. I mean, there's been stuff that's good, but I think we're waiting for the next big thing. Honestly, I don't even know if it's possible to have. Marvel was as close as we came. And I think the 23 films of the Infinity Saga were terrific overall. And Lord of the Rings is going to be, because the quality of Lord of the Rings just kept going up. You get to Return of the King and it was incredibly satisfying. Whereas Game of Thrones, I think, when they went off page, it really showed the difference in terms of, I have to say, it won't be like Star Wars. Speaking of Weiss and Benioff, the three-body problem. And as I said, Cixin Liu, I can't pronounce his name, but the three-body problem, if you haven't read that book, you can watch the Chinese series of it. It's just called Three Body. It's on YouTube. They're doing the TV series of that. It's a Hugo Award-winning hard sci-fi novel. It's great stuff. If we're going to get more of that, it really depends on who's making it and how it's done. I think the problem is in our corporate environment now. I don't think the current state of the industry is ever going to allow the kind of creative you would need a visionary that's given sort of carte blanche to do what they want. Even Denis Villeneuve, I bet he had to work with the studios, and I'm sure he's happy about that, but we should have got a 3-hour cut of Dune. I think the movie would have been infinitely, and I loved his version of Dune. The greatest verisimilitude in any science fiction film ever. I wish it was longer, and it would feel shorter if you had scenes where you had more back and forth where characters could talk to each other. Every scene, like the scene with the Gom Jabbar and Mother Mohayim, that scene is so quick. It should have peaks and valleys and make you go up and down. It's cut so quickly that you can't enjoy the scene. You can't the scenes in those movies should be delicious, if that makes any sense. Nothing is delicious. They've got these great scenes and great actors, but it happens so quickly that you can't settle back and have a scene where two actors are talking for a minute or two. It's cut to the very minimum of that script. And I read that script, and that script was fantastic. And anyway, that's just me. Michael Preston says, Ahsoka is bland. I wanted some emotion. I have to tell you, I feel nothing when I watch Ahsoka. I mean, I really don't. And I understand how people do. But again, there's no real people in it. There's nothing is coming at me. I'm watching it's almost like I'm watching a Star Wars school play, if that makes any sense. Because what does Ahsoka have to do with Star Wars, with what Star Wars was really about? The answer is nothing, because everything that's in Ahsoka was in the original trilogy. All of it is just variations on a theme. And it's boring. Scott Bartholomew says, new Star Wars is analogous to new Trek. In a way, it kind of is. I like the idea of where's the Star Wars version of Hamlet? Hell, I mean, even Kurosawa, when he made movies like Ron, like he was adapting King Lear. Go do that. Go back to Shakespeare. You know, I mean, hell, man, if you adapted Romeo and Juliet and you had somebody who was an imperial officer and somebody who was a rebel, you know, do something. Go back, and you're only when you're only looking at Star Wars, you're so far up your own ass that you've got nothing interesting to say. Joer75, Joeyer75 says, I saw The Shark is Broken on Broadway. The internet is a hoax. Talk to the best people online and afterwards. What do you mean the internet? So The Shark is Broken is the story about the making of Jaws. And it's like Robert Shaw's son wrote it and is in it. I really want to see it. I don't know as much about it as I probably should, but I do want to see it. Yes, I do. Scott Bartholomew says, Iddick portrayed in Trek will never be achieved. It sounds nice, but it is totally unrealistic. Well, that was a Vulcan philosophy of infinite diversity in infinite combinations. I mean, it just showed that the Vulcan civilization, they were seekers. You know, they were always looking for... Look at Spock in Star Trek The Motion Picture. He is seeking knowledge. He is seeking the way the universe fits together. I think Vulcans, even though it's an emotion, I think Vulcans had built into their philosophy a sense of wonder about the universe and about most things. And Spock, certainly when he was confronted by the great logic of V'ger, he went on a quest, you know, because infinite diversity and infinite combinations everywhere you look. You know, you put that is the universe. And I think it was a very hopeful, very optimistic, even though you could say, well, Rob, you know, the Iddick pin that was just made up for Lincoln Enterprises to sell merch. So, I don't care. It's still interesting. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations. All right. Here's the last letter. This letter comes to us from Tony Washburn, or as you might know him, Destiny Captain. Destiny Captain writes, the subject of this is a small request. Actually, I can't read this letter. He says I can't basically I can't tell you why I can't read this letter. But what Destiny Captain wants me to do is read or watch Stargate Universe. And for the reasons I won't go into, I promise what I am going to read from this letter is that what I ask of you is to please take a look at the third Stargate TV series, Stargate Universe, or STU. It only lasted 2 seasons, and that's just 40 episodes. It is often maligned by the Stargate fan base, but I find it to be a series I think about often since it was canceled in 2011. Maybe if you have any thoughts on it, you might give it a mention sometime in an upcoming stream. Well, Tony, I will. And I want to thank you for writing in this letter. It meant a lot. And, keep fighting the good fight, sir. And I'm for you, sir, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. People have tried to get me to do this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to jump into Stargate Universe because I did watch the first season of Stargate and I quite enjoyed it. As a pulp sci-fi thing, it's a lot of fun, and it was a lot smarter than I thought it would be. Really interesting mythology, and yeah. So I will jump in, and you're telling me that I don't necessarily have to watch all the Stargate? I don't think. I don't know. But anyway, and on that note, everyone, I'm going to end this epic stream, and I want to thank you all for being here. And there's a final thing that I did want to say. One of the members of the Post-Geek Singularity, Gil Bavell, passed away a couple of days ago. He was always very supportive. He especially loved whining about movies and was very complimentary about Elizabeth. He went under the online name of Cardinal Sin. I was shocked to hear that he passed away, that he's left us, and it's such a weird thing because he was doing streams and he was always trying to get me to come on his show, and I went on a couple times, and maybe I only went once, but I always thought I'll go on his show later. And he's a part of this channel, and he's been around for years, and I can't believe he's gone. So I guess I want to dedicate this episode of Robservations to Gil Bavell. Cardinal Sin. And I'll tell you something, and this is, so he sent me some stuff to have signed for him. Some House of the Dead stuff, some VHS stuff. He wanted Dave Parker to sign it for him. And I never got around to doing it. I saw Dave, because it's hard to see people face to face now, and I never got to sign it for him, and I never got back to him, and now I never will. So don't be lazy. Don't make excuses. And anyway, on that note, I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson for moderating. I want to thank Justin Toner for being here. And I don't know if Tom Jr. Yeah, he's here. Maybe Lord Toth is there. I don't know. But yeah. So thank you. I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via Super Chats and Tips. And yes, there will be a member call. So Tony Oliver, you can be there, and I'll if you're in the chat, you can go first. But other than that, and I want to thank our friend RRTNZ, Mr. Glenn Mark himself, for getting back on the he's doing timestamps for everything. So thank you for that. And I'm glad you're going to be more excited about what we're going to talk about. You're going to freak out, by the way, when you hear more about what we're doing. But we'll talk about that more later. And on another note, if you can go if you can go support Jeffrey's Space 1999 Eagle Has Landed Kickstarter, anything you can do. He's even got a dollar tier. Every little bit helps, basically because I want to get that documentary. I want a copy of it in 4K. And on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to everybody, have a better night. And God damn it, I'm still pissed about that Tomy Enterprise. I know. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, and I shouldn't, but I am.